This interview is part of the Make Money Online show, which is hosted and created by me, Barack Holman. Please make sure you go to the MakeMoneyOnlineShow.com. You can see the URL over here. And sign up over here and get my free 1 hour and 30-minute video on the book of The Science of Getting Rich, where I explain the entire book, page by page, all of the concepts. You'll also find amazing interviews and information that I'm sharing about making money online, marketing, bringing traffic to your site, changing your money mindset, and incredible good information. You're definitely going to want to sign up. Make sure you go to the MakeMoneyOnlineShow.com and sign up there. I had the honor and privilege of interviewing Gary Vaynerchuk today. Anybody who doesn't know who Gary is, please look him up. Just do a Google search, Gary Vaynerchuk. That's how you spell his name over there. And I have to thank Gary. It was an amazing interview. He was very candid, very open, and really shared some amazing information with us. This is a person who went from really having nothing as an immigrant from the Soviet Union to America and becoming an enormous financial success. That an inspiration for people, for entrepreneurs, and for average people who are looking to do more and be more in their life. Gary is one of those people. And I just, all I can say is thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this interview. I hope you get a lot out of it. And here you go, my interview with Gary Vaynerchuk. What an honor to get the only video interview in a very long time.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you. And thank you for being on time. And, you know, I waited a long time for the interview, but I have a lot of patience, so it's fine.
Me too. Good. Well, let's get right into it because I have to take my daughter to somewhere with her friends, so I want to give you as much time as possible.
All right. So you know a little bit about me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the first question is, you're giving all these audio interviews. This is the only video interview in a long time.
Yes.
You're the master of leverage. So how do I leverage this video as best I can?
You know, I think there's a lot of ways to go about it. I think it comes down to, leverage is one of the reasons I did this whole series, right? I wanted to give my name and my brand to the people that cared about me and my community so that they could leverage it. I would say one of the ways you could do it is to take this interview and share the embed with other websites and allow them to link back to your world because it's your IP now, right? This is your interview. So to me, that would be one of the biggest ways. Two, you could actually probably, especially within the Israeli kind of, tech community, probably you yourself could probably give 4 to 5 to 7 interviews about the interview to bring more exposure to your brand. Those are the two things that pop out as the first and most obvious to me.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. So everybody knows you want to buy the jets. Right? And I understand you picked a goal, you set it on the horizon, it gives you something to work towards. But from going from picking flowers and selling it to your neighbors to buying the jets, how do you get to that different mindset? Where do you go from one place to the next? How do you get there?
The funny thing is, Brock, that's the part that I'm most excited about, right? That's the only thing I care about. I'm one of those people that lives the cliche that the journey is greater than destination. And so, that's a big spread between, flowers and billion-dollar sports franchise. And I think, listen, it's something I've always wanted. It's something I've said since I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, maybe 10. So I don't think I was that smart to realize let's create a big goal, and then, that will allow me to be as big as possible because the bigger the goal, kind of shoot for the stars, end up on the moon. I don't think I was that smart. But the fact of the matter is how I get there is something I'm not quite sure about. What I can tell you, though, is that every decision I make professionally is impacted by that long-term view. And I think that's kept me from doing, silly things, short-sighted things. I think it's made me a better person because I'm always thinking so long-term.
It's something that you're that passionate about the Jets. I'm not a big sports fan, so it's hard for me to relate to.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it goes deeper than people think. I'll use this interview to explain it. You know, as you know, my family immigrated from Russia and the Soviet Union to America. The Jets, I mean, I learned how to speak English in part by watching the Jets, right? I became friends with the kids in the neighborhood and was accepted because in the first year or two, when I was 4 or 5, in a different neighborhood, I was bullied for not speaking English, right? So this gave me acceptance in the community and other children. So I think it goes much deeper. Listen, I live a very stressful life. The only thing in my life that makes me not think about anything else, the only thing that doesn't make me worry about the health of my family, my businesses, my ambition, the only thing are the 3 hours on a Sunday when the Jets play. It's the only thing that does that. So it's got a lot of value to my life.
I'm thinking just now, maybe there's a connection also to selling those cards, the sports
A-
cards.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just always been there. It's been something that I can look forward to. I love the journey. I love that they've never won. I love the climb. I love being a fan of a team that's not winning. Um, it's fun. But listen, at the same token, anybody who's watching this, you know, God forbid, God forbid, if somebody in my family was sick on a Sunday, I'm missing that football game. So, I'm very aware of where it sits in my life priorities, but it is important to me and I enjoy it. It's a fun goal.
So I'm just going through the questions here.
Sure.
Okay. Um, this was initially for a Facebook conference that I was doing online, interviewing experts about Facebook, but now it's already led into another thing that I'm working on, which is the Make Money Online show. So I just wanted to get your predictions about Facebook.
Okay.
Where do you think it's going in the next 5 to 7 years?
I think it's going to be around. Let me start with that because I think a lot of people are still debating that. I think anybody over 35 years old, let's call it 35 to 80 years old, is going nowhere. I do think that the younger generation, let's call it 25 and under, are always going to be pulled in other directions. It's kind of like this, Brock. I have a good analogy for how I think about Facebook. When you're under 25, you want to always go to the next hottest club, right? After dinner, you want to go to the next hottest club. But when you're 35 and older, you and your partner, your wife, your husband, you always want to go to your 4 or 5 favorite restaurants over and over, right? You get comfortable. You're not looking for the next big thing. And so I think they're going to have a lot of strength and growth, both mobily and in general, evolution of product, because they're going to keep hundreds of millions of users that are 35 and older, 25 and older. Under that age, I think what you saw them do with Instagram is going to become a common theme. I expect Facebook to, over the next 5 to 7 years, to buy multiple platforms that represent coolness or information under the 25 and under demo. And I don't think Instagram's the last one or the only one.
So it's interesting with Facebook. You gave the example of a restaurant. So you only go back to a restaurant if it's good, even if you're
Yes,
comfortable with it. But Facebook is a mess.
Facebook's a mess from a much smaller set of people than you think.
Aha.
From techies, from people that have been there a long time. I would tell you that what Facebook has done with the news feed is revolutionary. It's tried to clean it up for you. It's tried to make less noise. And, I think Mark is extremely talented, much more than people think. I think Zuckerberg's stronger than people think. I think he'll mature. He'll adjust. He surrounds himself with strong people. Yeah, I mean, listen, it has flaws, but, saying Facebook's a mess is like saying Israel's a mess, or the United States is a mess, or
All right.
the best thing. Great things have a mess in them. It's like saying your family's a mess, but it's still your favorite thing in the world. Everything's got problems, and when it's big, it's magnified because everybody's looking for them. Facebook is 7 years old, maybe 8. Maybe 9. I'm trying to think. 2004. Facebook's 9 years old. Brock, every 9-year-old child in the world is a mess. Some of them. When I was 9, I still peed my bed at night. So I think we've got to give it time to evolve. I think they can make 1 or 2 acquisitions that change their business. They right now, right this second, every single 12 to 21-year-old person in America is obsessed with Instagram, right? Everyone. And Facebook owns it. So I don't know how much of a mess they are.
So I was talking from a technical point of view because I'm a marketer. I spent a lot of time marketing on Facebook. It's amazing. In my community, in my religious community, and there were a lot of English speakers. I grew up in the States. I moved here 20 years ago. People are on Facebook all the time. And people will say, hey, aren't we friends on Facebook? And the guy will say, no, I just closed my account. Because people are obsessed with it. I'm 42, so I'm not in that such a young category. People are obsessed with Facebook. They're on it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think things will evolve. And I'm sure that people are going to leave the product. It can't have every single person on it like it's had, right? It will evolve. But I think that if that person that closed their Facebook account now uses Instagram, then Facebook still has you, right? And so here's what I know. People will always communicate with people online. That is going to happen for the rest of our time as human beings forever. And as long as Facebook owns the platforms, or at least has the far majority, they win. Listen, Google doesn't have 100% of the search business. SEO marketing isn't as good as it used to be in the late 90s, right?
Even so 2 years ago.
There you go. So you could say that's a mess, but it's still around. Television still gets billions of dollars in advertising, even though you could say it's a mess. It's not as good as it was in 1975. Same with direct mail, right? So same with radio. So as an advertising platform, has it diluted? Absolutely, because you're smart enough to know, I'm smart enough to know, in the early days of a platform, you get more because there's a land grab. And so guys like you and I have to continue to innovate and play in new places, whether it's Vine or Medium or Tumblr or Instagram or Snapchat, but there's still a place for the tried and true. It just evolves and becomes a different thing.
I'm not following the questions here. I'm just following the conversations. I'm looking for the masses. There's something like 1 billion people on Facebook. And they're sitting there and in my opinion, they're wasting time. Because I never waste time on Facebook. I mean,
let me ask you a question.
That's interesting because you answer everybody's tweets. You sit there for hours on Twitter. Right? And my Twitter account is all automated.
Right. To me, I'm much more focused on the emotional equity. And an automated tweet coming to me doesn't feel authentic, and it makes me feel like you don't value me. And so I think that one thing that people that are very mathematical about this, and it sounds like you're going into a quant conversation, the scalability, the efficiencies, I think the one thing that we have to debate is the value of the impression. So yes, it's tortoise and hare. Maybe I only get to 100 people in 2 hours or 3 hours, and you can get to thousands of impressions in 1 minute. But to me, it's what's the value of the impression? One of the biggest things, Barack, that I'm very passionate about right now, and I'd love to get your take on it, is we don't quantify the value of an impression enough. We get the overall number, right? I'll give you a good example. Samsung has pop-up ads on ESPN.com on mobile right now. So every time I try to go to ESPN.com, a Samsung ad pops up, right? And I can't even get to it because, the screen's small. So I X out the Samsung ad. They've gotten 100 impressions from me. And back at the advertising agency and headquarters, they're high-fiving, saying, hey, 100 impressions. What they don't know is I'm never buying a Samsung product again because I hate Samsung because it's in my way. The impression's bad, not good. And so I understand what you're saying. And listen, there's a mix of both, right? You need to have efficiencies and authenticity and emotion, EQ, IQ, as I call it. But I would tell you that I think people waste time when they sit outside a cafe in beautiful Tel Aviv for 2.5 hours drinking a bottle of rosé and just talking with their friends. Is that a waste of time? Because that's what they're doing digitally on Facebook.
So just so you don't misunderstand me, because I'm an internet marketer, I have to have a presence on Facebook. Of
course.
I have to be on Twitter. I have to be on all these places. So I don't have time for it, though.
I understand.
I've got 7 kids. I walk to
awesome.
So it's interesting because I listened to a lot of interviews with you before we had this, and you talked about integrating work and family.
Yeah.
So the way I do it is I wake the kids up in the morning, I go to shul, I pray, then I come to work, then I go back home. I actually take a nap for 2 hours because I hardly ever sleep.
Yes.
Then the kids come home from school. I'm there. I take my lunch. I come back to work. I come home at 8 o'clock. I put them in bed, and then I work until 1 or 2 in the morning. And that's how I do it. So I integrate the two. I like them to sit there on Twitter or Facebook but I have to be there.
Listen, by the way, what's very ironic is I don't think that I would massively over-index on Facebook and Twitter if I wasn't a businessman marketer either. Not that I don't have time to watch a football game or something of that nature. It's just that I get it. It's just how do you want to communicate with the people that you love? You're very fortunate that you've been able to be successful enough to be able to control your workday around your family. I mean, that is, to me, when I hear that, when I just heard you go through your little spiel there, my heart smiled because you're living when I wrote Crush It, my hope was that I could teach people to live the life that you're living, that if there was a way to somehow afford to do what you loved or even do what you have loved so that you could spend as much time with your family as possible, that to me is the biggest nachas in the world.
Right, that's the ultimate. Because I heard an interview with you just like 5 minutes ago where you were saying that you started the finish line and then you reverse engineer it. So that's what I'm doing with my life. I'm saying, let's say, God forbid, doctor told me, you got a month to live. What am I going to do with that month? I'm going to spend every minute with my family.
Absolutely.
So what's the point? What am I going to spend my life doing a job that I hate, doing miserable things? I'd rather make less money and spend more time with my family. Because that's really where it is.
I could not agree with you more.
Okay, just wanted to get your thoughts on that. All right, so now this is a question from a friend of mine, Eitan Press, from over here in Jerusalem. He says, can you try to explain how the Jewish people as a brand have survived as long as they have?
I think that's a really interesting question. I would tell you that the answer comes from the perspective of the person that looks at the Jewish brand. I would say that some people that are in the world that are not in love with the Jewish brand, if you ask them that question, they would say perseverance and grit and toughness, right? I would say that somebody who's more fond of the Jewish brand, as I am, I would come with family and love and strength of each other, right? So I think it just comes down to who's viewing that. But clearly such a small percentage of population, much like the American Indians, much like many other, African Americans in the United States, there's, it's much like New York Jet fans, Barack. When there's less, there's a bonding. Much like the early users of Twitter and Facebook that now say it's not as good. When there's less of you, there's a bonding moment. When you need to rely on each other, there's a bonding moment. And I think there's enormous admiration, respect, and perseverance are the superlatives that I would say most drive the health of that brand.
Well, it's interesting because the Jewish people are not in the first 5 years of their company. It's a 3,000-year-old religion, which is a miracle.
Absolutely.
All of this history, even the state of Israel itself is a miracle. The Jewish people survived as a cohesive group is an unbelievable thing.
I agree.
Okay. I just had to say that. So I was doing, of course, a little bit of research for the interview, and I saw you invested in all these tech companies. And then I saw a video with you saying that these tech companies aren't going to last so long because people don't know how to manage them. They're all into just getting an investment and being an entrepreneur. So where's
got it. You mean the one where I said
in the park or something like that?
Yes, got it. Yeah, listen, I mean, I've done better with the companies I invested in 2007, 8, and 9 than I have with 10, 11, 12, and 13. I mean, now that has a lot to do with me. As I, knock on wood, have done better, it's made me a little riskier because I can afford to be a little riskier. And by nature, you become an animal that like, ooh, look what I did over here. You start thinking you're too smart. But yes, everybody's trying to be an entrepreneur. I had a former employee email me this weekend. She's amazing. Great gal. She worked with me for 3 years at Vaynermedia. And she was just saying an email to say hello. How's everything going? And at the end, she said, P.S., you would be disgusted what's going on here. She's working for a 4-person startup. 4. And they're leaving half days on Friday to go to the shore and this, that, and the other thing. Now, notwithstanding the conversation that you and I had about work-life balance just now, what she was referring to is they're not hustling as hard. There's a lot of kids right now, and that's what it is, young adults coming out of schools, growing up in great families, going to universities, Ivy Leagues, and they watched the Zucks movie, and everybody now thinks that they are Mark Zuckerberg, and they're coming out of school, and they don't realize what it takes to build a real business. Listen, you're 42, and I don't know your life, but I'm going to guess, outside of miraculous circumstances, most people 22 to 25 can't have it exactly how they want. You've got to put a little work in the beginning to get there, right? And so I think we have a generation of people that are trying to skip that step. They just want to raise money, and raising money has a huge responsibility of being successful. My dad taught me the day you borrow money is the worst day of your life. And so I just wanted to make that video because I think there's a lot of very smart kids that should be the number 2, the number 3, the number 4, the number 5 in the company. Right. But if you want to be the number 1, you don't go to the shore on Saturday and Sunday to go to the beach. You work at 22 when you borrowed money and you're trying to build a big company.
So where are they getting funded? I tried to start a tech company like 2005. I almost had $1 million investment. It fell through. It was torture to get to that.
The world's changed so much, bro. The world changed. I mean, getting funding in 2009 was difficult.
So why are these kids getting funded?
Because Mark Zuckerberg built $1 billion company and it became culture in America. And now everybody either thinks they can do it or everybody wants to be Peter Thiel and put $100,000 in or $100 million. He put $100 million. But everybody, listen, I made 7 figures on Tumblr. My friends now, that know the story super well, my relatives now are like, hey, Gary, when you make your next investment, I want to make an investment. And I tell them, listen, for every one like that, there's 30 that's not. So it's lottery. It's psychology. Everybody wants to make a fast dollar, even a guy like me that is grounded in hardcore principles. If I can find efficient ways to make financial gains, I want to figure that out. Right now, everybody's very romantic, so you have a lot of people throwing around a lot more money than they used to. In 2005, bro, angel investors were very rare. Very, very rare to have VCs. There were just, outside of Silicon Valley, it was very difficult. Now, all of a sudden, everybody's an angel investor. Every 25-year-old that has a trust fund from their grandfather, very easy money that it came to them. What's writing a $100,000 check when your parents or your grandparents left you a couple $1 million, and then you could walk around saying you're an angel investor in this hot startup, and then God forbid you hit it? Oof. So, it's very sexy right now.
Well, 1 in 30, you were talking about 1 in 30. That's much better than playing the lottery.
And listen, it is. And a guy like me that has built a big reputation is getting asked to be in much better companies. I'm going to be 1 in 30. Most people are going to be 1 in 10,000 because they can't get into the best deals. They have to, and it's kind of like, somebody said something very interesting to me that I use a lot now. He said, he's in LA, he's a movie guy, and he says to me that he's starting to invest in technology, right? And he's telling me he just saw this great deal and I have to look at it. And then 2 hours later, he tells me the story of his friend in Chicago, a lawyer, who said, hey, John, you have to check out this movie script. I just got it on my desk. It's going to be an Oscar winner. And he answers his friend in Chicago saying, if a movie script lands in Chicago, that means everybody in LA has seen it 10 times and it's a piece of dreck, right? And I said, funny you should say that because 2 hours ago when you mentioned that startup, if a startup ends up in Los Angeles, that means every single person in San Francisco and New York has passed on it and it's a piece of dreck. And so, that's how I think about it.
That's a good way of filtering out your language, by the way.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Because this is going to be a podcast on iTunes, and it's got to be clean.
No worries. I'm good.
Okay, so I listened to both of your books. By the way, anybody who hasn't bought your books, they should buy the audio version because they'll know if you had lentil soup or chicken soup. And you go off the script all the time. It's much more entertaining than reading it.
Thank you.
So do you like to say that I've only done what I was good at?
Yes.
And that seems to me a bit of a luxury or good luck.
Yes.
I think that might be one of the secrets of your success because everybody wants to do what they're good at. The one thing that you were good at, you weren't good in school.
Right.
But you were good at sales.
Yes.
So it was exciting and you wanted to keep doing it.
Yes.
Everybody ultimately wants to do what they're good at. And so what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a really good point. I got lucky that what I was good at actually allows me to do something for a living, and it's a core thing that maps into anything. When you could sell anything, you're in a good place. You're going to be successful. If you're only good at, singing, breaking through is difficult. But here's what's interesting to me. I think the world has changed so much. I think that the people that have been good at things that were financially rewarding have always been successful. But the people that were good at something creative weren't, because they didn't know how to navigate or make the money. Now with the way the internet works, the amount of actors, actresses, comedians, and musicians that are going to be discovered because of YouTube and Vine, for example, is an incredible amount in comparison to how many were discovered 30 years ago. Scooter Braun found Justin Bieber on YouTube. Justin Bieber would have lived in a small town in Canada and never found any fame. And he's, everybody could say, well, that's a very one in a million. It's really not. There are hundreds of thousands of people right now making six figures a year on YouTube alone that would have never been discovered. And so, to me, I believe that going in on your strengths and spending more time on trying to be great at what you're naturally good at versus trying to fix what you're not is even a better model today than it has ever been before. And so ultimately, when I talk about that, the context is, instead of spending 4.5 hours learning about science when I hated it, I spent those 4.5 hours memorizing prices in baseball card guides. And so on Saturday, when I went to the baseball card show, I did better because I had all that in my brain. Thus, that gave me more self-esteem to believe that I was who I was, which led to a very successful career.
So instead of trying to work on what's not good, you try to improve what is good.
I think so. Now, listen, you have to be a citizen in the world, right? You need to know how to drive. You need to not be rude. There's certain things that are very lightweight, but core things. I think that actors, actresses, and athletes are heralded in our world, yet most of them, since a young age, have only focused on that, right? That, I don't think LeBron James, worried about class too much when he was 13 years old. Magic Johnson speaks about cutting class or before school or any minute he could, he'd go outside and shoot free throws, right? So I think putting in, the Malcolm Gladwell theory of these 10,000 hours, I don't know if it's 10,000, 100,000, 4,000. I'm sure it's different for everybody, but I can tell you that if I didn't I came out at 22 years old running a family business, I was already an experienced businessman. It's why it all happened so fast.
Okay, so you talk about...
Hey, Barack, I have 4 more minutes before I have to run my daughter out.
Okay, so let me get to the final question.
Sure.
I watched your rant from the hip on the plane back to London, which for me was a real inspiration.
Thank you.
So what's the message you want to leave us with?
You know what's so funny? You're a real inspiration for me in this interview, and I mean that. The message I want to leave is you summed it up. It's how I think too. I actually think about dying, or somebody in my life that I care about dying, almost every day. It's very strange, and I don't talk about it a lot, but I figured I'm going to give you a big interview because this has felt like a big interview. I think about it every day. Now, I'm a workaholic, and do I spend every moment with my children and my parents? I don't. I do think about it every day, and I do make decisions based on it every day. And when I say take a swing, don't be scared, I do think about that last day. I do think about laying in bed as a 90-year-old, hopefully older, but I'll take 90. I lay there and I think about, I know me. I'm very retrospective. I'm very retrospective at a young age. Most of my contemporaries, most of my grandparents, most of my older friends, I've been lucky to have friends in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. They only become retrospective as they get closer to the finish line. I've been blessed with being retrospective from the beginning. You've been blessed with being retrospective to the beginning. My only hope is that somebody watches this interview and says, like I get hundreds of emails a year saying, I watched your video in 2008 when you said stop watching Lost. I watched your video on the plane. I read Crush It. There's a couple moments in my career, hopefully maybe this is another one in this video, where somebody watches something and it clicks. And that's what I'm trying to do, because I care about my legacy. At my vainest level, I care about my legacy. And I don't want my legacy to be that I bought the jets. I want my legacy to be that I helped people at scale through never wait. I will make this interview. I will talk like this, and my principles will be the same for the rest of my life. I'm not saying that many different things, and I think you know that, Barack. I'm saying the same thing over and over in different ways, over and over in different ways. And so, what am I trying to accomplish with these things? I'm trying to impact people, because I've been so blessed with a specific outlook that I know is right, and that I hope that I can. And I've been also gifted with an energy as a communicator that people actually listen to. They've heard it before, but I guess the way I say it, the way it's in me, maybe because it's so pure, they can taste it, and it moves them sometimes to do things that makes me feel very nice. I want every single person in the world to show up to my funeral. That is how I live my life.
So I just want to say one thought, and I know we're done. The thing that I ask myself all the time, they're not when my life is over, and I'm a religious Jew, so I know I'm going to have to face a judgment when life is over.
Yes.
They're going to ask me, not if I was Mark Zuckerberg, not if I was Gary Vaynerchuk, what
right.
I Barack Coleman? Did I live up to my fullest potential? And that's what I ask myself every day. Was I who I could be?
Good for you.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Thank you so much.
I could shake your hand. I would give you a virtual handshake.
Thank you, my friend. I wish you well. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.